Imagine a bank, not a back alley operation, not some shady offshore shell with a PO box address, a real bank. One with marble lobbies, offices in London, branches in New York, and a board of directors full of respected names. Now imagine that bank knowingly holds accounts for Saddam Hussein, for Manuel Noriega, for the Medellin Cartel, and according to a US Senate investigation, for the CIA, all at the same time. This bank existed. It operated in 78 countries. It had over $20 billion in deposits. It served 1 million ordinary customers, teachers, nurses, small business owners, who had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. And it took nearly 20 years for the world to shut it down. The only reason we know the full story is because of a federal agent who spent 5 years living a lie, who drove Rolls-Royces, flew on private jets, drank champagne with cartel bosses, all while a tape recorder ran quietly in his briefcase, and who brought the whole thing down at a wedding. This is the story of BCCI, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International, or as investigators who looked inside it came to call it, the Bank of Crooks and Criminals International. And it is one of the most insane true stories in the history of money. Let's go back to 1972. A Pakistani financier named Agha Hassan Abedi has a vision. He wants to build a bank not for the Western financial establishment, but for the developing world. A bank that would give poorer nations access to global finance. A bank that would level the playing field. That was the pitch anyway. He registered the bank in Luxembourg, chosen specifically because Luxembourg had some of the loosest banking regulations in the world. He put his head offices in Karachi and London. And he started raising money. The bank grew fast, aggressively fast. Within a decade, BCCI had over 400 branches across 78 countries. It had assets exceeding $20 billion, making it the 7th largest private bank in the world. It had 1 million depositors. It sponsored cricket tournaments. It had politicians and former heads of state on its advisory boards. From the outside, it looked like a remarkable success story. A global bank built by a Pakistani entrepreneur, serving customers that Western banks had ignored. But from the very beginning, something was deeply wrong. Abedi had structured BCCI in a way that was, deliberately, impossible to fully examine. There was no single country that regulated the whole thing, no single auditor who could see all the books. The corporate structure was a maze holding companies connected to affiliates, connected to subsidiaries, connected to what investigators would later call banks within banks. It wasn't messy by accident, it was designed that way, because Abedi hadn't just built a bank for the developing world, he had built the perfect machine for hiding money. And the world's most dangerous people were about to find out. Before I tell you what BCCI did, let me give you 30 seconds on how money laundering actually works, because it makes the BCCI story make a lot more sense. There are 3 stages. Placement. This is where dirty cash first enters the financial system. You've got $1 million in drug money, you need to get it into a bank account without anyone asking where it came from. Layering. This is where you make the money impossible to trace. You move it, you split it. You bounce it through multiple accounts, multiple countries, multiple shell companies until the trail goes completely cold. Integration. This is the finish line. The money re-enters the economy looking clean. It buys real estate, funds businesses, pays salaries. It looks legitimate because by now on paper it is. Most criminals focus on placement. That's where they're most vulnerable, most visible. BCCI's speciality was the middle step, layering, and they turned it into an art form. Here's how it worked in practice. A client, let's say a cartel, would deposit dirty cash into a BCCI account, often through a private banking relationship. BCCI would then run that money through a series of transactions across multiple jurisdictions. Fake loans, nominee accounts, shell companies with puppet directors. Wire transfers bouncing between countries in ways that no single regulator could follow, because no single regulator had visibility across the whole network. The money would arrive somewhere clean, attached to paperwork that made it look like a legitimate loan repayment or business transaction. And the clients were not small-time. BCCI held accounts for Manuel Noriega, the Panamanian dictator, Saddam Hussein, Abu Nidal, one of the most notorious terrorists of the 20th century, Samuel Doe, the Liberian warlord, and the Medellin Cartel at the time, the most powerful drug trafficking organization on earth. According to a US Senate investigation, the CIA also held accounts at BCCI, using them for covert operations. Think about that, one bank. simultaneously serving a dictator, a drug cartel, a terrorist, and a national intelligence agency. But it gets worse. BCCI wasn't just laundering money for bad clients. It was secretly buying American banks, placing puppet owners on the paperwork to hide the true ownership, so it could get access to the American financial system from the inside. And there were people who knew. In 1982, 9 years before BCCI collapsed, an internal memo from the Bank of England described BCCI as on its way to becoming the financial equivalent of the Titanic. They did nothing. Regulators in the UK, the US, and elsewhere received warning after warning. And each time the decision was made, for reasons that included political pressure, embarrassment, and in some cases outright corruption, to look the other way. BCCI had built something the financial world had never quite seen before, not just a criminal enterprise that had made itself too connected to fail. By the mid-1980s, the US government knew something was wrong with BCCI, but knowing it and proving it were two very different things. Enter Robert Mazur. Mazur was a federal agent with US Customs. And in 1985, he was given an assignment that would consume the next 5 years of his life. Go undercover, infiltrate the Medellin Cartel, find out how they were moving their money. His cover identity, Bob Musella, wealthy businessman, mob connections, very comfortable with cash that didn't ask questions. Mazur was good at this, frighteningly good. He moved through the world of the cartel with ease, staying in $1,000 a night hotel suites, driving Rolls-Royces, flying private, drinking the finest champagne with men who would have him killed without a second thought if they suspected the truth. And under his designer suits in his expensive briefcase, a tape recorder, always running. Through the cartel, Mazur got access to something bigger. BCCI's private banking division, the part of the bank that catered to the ultra-wealthy, the powerful, the untouchable. The part where no one asked where the money came from. He recorded everything. Conversations with cartel members, with BCCI bankers, with businessmen who acted as middlemen. Over the course of the operation, he documented more than $34 million funneled to him directly, cash delivered to launder for drug kingpins. The operation was called Sea Chase. And by 1988, Mazur had everything he needed. The question was how to end it. How do you arrest dozens of powerful, dangerous people, bankers, cartel members, international businessmen, all at once without tipping anyone off? His answer: throw a party. Specifically, a wedding. Bob Musella, the fictional mobster, announced his engagement, and he invited his most important contacts to celebrate: BCCI executives, cartel members, corrupt businessmen. A gathering of some of the most dangerous financial criminals in the world, all flying in, dressing up, and sitting down to dinner together at a resort in Palm Harbor, Florida. The wedding guests were arrested. More than 80 people were charged worldwide. BCCI pleaded guilty to money laundering. And for the first time, the world got a clear look at what had been happening inside one of the largest banks on earth. Robert Mazur later wrote a book about his experience. It was turned into a film called The Infiltrator, with Bryan Cranston playing Mazur. Worth watching after this. Here's what makes the BCCI story more than just a crime story. After the Tampa indictment in 1988, after BCCI pleaded guilty to money laundering, regulators in the UK still did not shut the bank down. The Bank of England knew. Pricewaterhouse, BCCI's auditor, delivered a report in 1991 showing evidence of widespread fraud. The Bank of England's response was not to close BCCI. It was to find ways to keep it afloat, to prevent its collapse, and to keep the truth away from the million depositors who had their savings inside. They called the report Sandstorm internally, because even the name of the investigation was kept secret. It took until July 5, 1991, for regulators in 7 countries to finally act, raiding BCCI offices simultaneously across the globe, locking down records, and shutting the bank down for good. What they found in the wreckage was devastating. Total liabilities $10.64 billion, realizable assets $1.16 billion, nearly $9.5 billion gone, stolen, vanished through 2 decades of fraud. And who paid the price? Not the dictators, not the cartel bosses, not the senior bankers who'd spent years in first class skimming from client accounts and covering their tracks. Thousands of ordinary depositors, teachers, families, small business owners, many of them in developing countries, the very people the bank had claimed to exist to serve. They lost everything. Manhattan District Attorney Robert Morgenthau, who spent years pursuing the case when others wouldn't, called it simply the largest bank fraud in world financial history. 20 years later, a former U.S. Treasury official would look back at BCCI and note that the tools the bank used, anonymous shell companies, nominee directors' offshore accounts, political influence, were all still in place. The bank died, the playbook didn't. So what do you actually take from this? 3 things. 1. Money laundering isn't about hiding cash in a briefcase. It's about exploiting the legitimate financial system, its complexity, its loopholes, its international gaps, and turning all of that against the people the system is supposed to protect. 2. The most powerful laundering operations don't look criminal. They look like banks. They look like holding companies. They look like investment funds. BCCI had marble lobbies and cricket sponsorships. The danger is always in what looks most respectable. 3. The biggest enablers aren't shadowy criminals. They're bankers who don't ask questions, auditors who sign off on books they know are wrong, politicians who take donations and look the other way, regulators who know about a Titanic and decide not to say anything. BCCI operated for nearly 20 years in 78 countries with 1 million customers. It served dictators, cartels, and intelligence agencies simultaneously, not because the world didn't know, because the world found it convenient not to. If you want to understand how money actually works in this world, not how it's supposed to work, but how it actually works, stories like this one are where you start. If this was useful, subscribe because there are a lot more stories like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.